All right, welcome back, everyone. Welcome back to another Welcome to the J episode. I am your host, Jahenns Manigat, aka Canadian Rebel, aka 12. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Field of 68 Media Network for content such as this, different guys representing their different alma maters, like I'm doing today. Very special guest. Once again, needs no introduction. He is my guy. He is our beloved Michael Vandevoort, aka Manager Mike. Mike, how are you doing today, brother?
Good, Jahenns. Every time I hear you go through your nickname Rolodex, I don't know how a guy can't, smile a little bit. It's the joy you bring Creighton fans with your energy is it's hard to match, brother.
What I realize is it's not so much of a Rolodex as it is basically two names. It's my government, it's Canadian Rebel, and it's 12. Like I don't know if anyone else in Omaha knows me as anything different, but that is what it is for sure. Like I don't know, I've been kind of blessed that obviously through my playing career, I have met so many great people in Omaha, in Nebraska, that I'm still able to do something like a podcast talking about Jays basketball and people are interested. I'm really happy about that. Like that's a whole lot of fun. And then obviously I get to catch up with some of my best friends that I made over the years, you being one of them. And that always makes me happy. Like I literally just said while we were off air, like every time I see you, I just get so happy because it's few and far between, but it's like when we talk, it's like we never left, like it's
Yeah,
like we're sophomores all over again.
yeah. Put us back in Swanson, see what's going on.
Man, Swanson days were the okay. Let's get into what we need to get to before we get sidetracked. The Jays obviously lose a tough double overtime game against another top 25 opponent in Providence. They were ranked 24th. We are ranked 18th. First of all, how good does it feel to see the Jays back in the top 25 after such a long hiatus of what we have to go through this year?
Yeah, I mean, there was never a moment of panic for me. Even like I don't know, every game there's never really a moment of panic, but over the course of the season, even with the 6 game losing streak, I still had a lot of confidence in these guys, the coaching staff. I think ideally we'll look back at the end of the season as that being a pretty big building block, not only for this program but even moving forward, or this team, but for the program moving forward. So winning 8 in a row anywhere is hard, non-con conference. So kudos to the staff, kudos to the guys at home, on the road, getting up for some tough games, and then you go to Providence and a team that's 35-1 at home in their last 36. Like that's a ridiculous statistic.
Mhm.
And it's on a Tuesday night. It's a hard place to go and play. I talked to a few fans that went. The first half seemed a bit sleepy, but it was hard to tell on TV like how good the atmosphere was, I thought. But the second half and overtimes sounds like maybe the beer finally kicked in for their student section. Who knows?
So when I watch the games like on the broadcast, I try not to have the volume up. Like I got that tip from Shannon Sharp. Shout out to Shannon Sharp who does his undisputed and all that stuff. Anytime you watch his football or basketball, he tries not to be influenced by like the commentators, which is very easy to have happen. When you got a guy like Bill Raftery calling games, like you just you just kind of lean into his opinion a little bit, right? And
Yeah,
because I have to give my own opinion about how the Jays played or whatever, like I just find it a little easier to not have the sound on. I started doing that like a little bit late into last year, and then I'm doing it a lot more this year now. So I don't quite know about what the atmosphere felt like, but looking on TV, it looked live. Like it looked like the fans were a factor from the get-go. So again, like I was there. Our guy Mobu Luwaga Ogini was there. Shout out to Mogbu. He told me that the game was insane from like his perspective. We also had Jordan Scary out there too, our East Coast Creighton representatives. So, but for me, like as I was watching the game, I was just like, man, like this is tough. And I also know like what Providence is like playing there. So I was just like, this is no easy feat for anybody to walk into that building, right?
yeah, yeah. I guess that explains the last 36, and that explains historically. I think they're like 75% at home. So
Mhm.
I think the one thing goes for because we think about what's happened lately. Like Providence is a historically really good basketball program, and obviously what Ed Cooley is doing now is really impressive. You lose all 5 starters, and you have a chance to win Big East title again. Like kudos to them, man. I don't like them. I like Ed, but I don't like Providence as a whole. So maybe we'll see them again in Big East tournament at MSG.
That's funny because Mac was asked about that in his post game. If they're willing to do another type of game like that at Madison Square Garden, and Mac even kind of like laugh, kind of scoffs it off a little bit, like, man, these guys they're a tough out, like for sure. And I think that's just kind of the respect that Mac has, not only for Cooley, but for the program too. We all know like Providence fans, like they're more into booing you than cheering their own team, which is why it's always kind of a tough place to play there. And I feel like maybe that's why you and I have that same sentiment, like, man, forget Providence, like, you know what I mean? But you got to give it up to them. That's a really good, talented team. Obviously, they're able to come out on top 94-86 against the Jays. I thought for the most part that we played a pretty good game on the road. Like you want to be in there in the thick of things. You never want to let the game kind of get away from you. And I didn't think there was a lead that was bigger than six
Yeah.
throughout the entirety of the game, right? If I'm not mistaken. Obviously, they were able to pull away near the end there. Man, it's such a game of inches. You got Kaluma who has the ability to tip the ball in. I want to get into that last the last few plays in regulation, obviously. So Matt calls a timeout. He gets it on his own side. He draws up a play. What does Cooley do? You talk about it being a chess match between two of the great coaches in the Big
Yeah.
East Conference, two of the great coaches nationwide. Cooley comes out and traps them immediately, which totally catches Creighton off guard. Uh, Trey has to pass the ball out. It ends up in Shireman's hands at the last second, he kind of sees Kaluma cut into the basket. He lobs it up to the rim, which I thought was like an incredible pass for the double team coming at him, right? Him having the ball for a split second, having to make that recognition. Kaluma's just unable to finish there. And he's literally this close to being a 2 point game at the buzzer and the Jays win.
Yeah.
Talk to me about like as that play was developing, as you see the double team coming, Mike, what was going through your head?
Well, I think the first thought is what every fan thinks, like you got to take the time out in that situation as a coach, right? Like 10 seconds left, draw something up. I'm against that. I am of the opinion, don't let the defense get set. Don't let them even think about, blitzing that first inbounds, to Trey. So we saw it in the first overtime where Mac didn't use the timeout and let his guys go. Devin Carter makes a really good defensive play there. But give me R2 and a ball screen with that guy all game long,
Right.
and we'll trust him to make a play. But yeah, I mean, again, to your point, you hang around, you stick around. You're down six, I think we were down six late, and then R2 made some pretty unbelievable plays. They kept going under ball screens. Glad to see him make a few shots versus those guys, as Rafferty pointed out on the broadcast. I think he was 1 for 13 coming in versus Providence. Trey gets it to Baylor. Baylor somehow has the thought process to throw it up at the rim. Like
The
there's
wherewithal to do that.
yeah,
Yeah.
there's no way any of us are making that decision. We're like trying to throw up a terrible shot, and then Art, tries to go up, and it just the timing of it was a little bit off. So uh, it's a tough. I mean, it's a coin flip. Really good adjustment by Cooley. Like to your point, it's X's and O's and chess and checkers, and we had two of the best going at it with that stuff late game. Sometimes you don't get the role that you need, and being on the road, those are the things that have to go your way.
What I love the most about like after all of that happened, obviously they kind of go to their signs, they regroup, they go back out for the first overtime. The camera kind of pans over to Mac, who's like kind of giggling, and it pans over to Cooley, who's giggling too. I can only imagine between like, let's just say this is you and I coaching against each other, Vandy, and then you just pulled that move on me. I'm obviously looking down and be like, bro, how like, why, like, so I thought that was just such a cool moment. Just to see like, obviously, like not only the friendship between the two coaches, but like, yeah, it is a chess match. It is me versus you. Of course, players wins games for sure, but like the ability to like call things on the fly, the adjustment that Cooley made, I thought like obviously he deserves big time kudos for that. And I think like that was Mac's like professional way of like showing props to him, like, hey, you caught us off guard there for sure. Like you definitely deserve like a pat on the back for pulling that. Because
Yeah,
again, let's think about it, right? The situation, the Jays are in bonus. Any of his players hack at the ball, accidentally hit Trey's arm. We got an 86% free throw shooter going to the line to finish the game, right? He trusts that his players were going to be obviously like disciplined enough to keep their hands up, not hack away at the ball. the ball comes out. It is what it is. We're heading into overtime. Like I just thought like that was a really cool moment. I wanted to know like what was your thought when you saw that on the screen happening in front of you?
Yeah, I'm sure there's a part of Coach Mack that was wanting to give a middle finger, just based on how good their relationship is. I've talked to him about
Mhm.
that in the past, and those two guys really respect each other, care a lot about each other's families. I imagine when they sit down, whether it's at media day or even there's a chance Cooley may have come to the hotel in Providence. Like they don't even talk hoops; they talk life, and I think
Right.
that's the strong bond of being coaches at an elite level. Uh, yeah, I'm sure. You don't even expect it, and when it happens, the reaction of Trey to get it to Baylor, like that's a tough decision to make, and then
Mhm.
having having awareness of where the clock is at and where everyone's on the floor. So look, good players make good plays. I mean, Providence is unexpectedly really, really good. Devin Carter, I thought was incredible. And then having his dad in attendance, and guy just made plays. And then Hopkins goes all 50 minutes. Jay, you could probably speak to that a little bit. Playing 50 minutes of basketball at this elite of a level, I gotta believe he was a bit gassed at the end of the game.
Oh, it's a good thing for sure for both Jays and Providence that they don't play again until Saturday. I'm assuming they both had a day off today. Sorry, yesterday.
Yesterday.
We're recording this on a Thursday, just in case you guys were wondering. But yeah, like I know honestly, like the both starting fives, they definitely had to have like an entire day off, even maybe even into today. Like that probably bled into today just to make sure that they're game ready for Saturday because that's a lot of minutes that all those guys logged in. I'm looking at it right now. Kaluma 47, Kalkbrenner 45,
Oof.
Shireman 47, Ryan Nemhart 47, Trey Alexander 49. You know what I mean? Like those are a whole lot of minutes. You mentioned Hopkins playing all 50. Croswell played 46. Carter, who, like you said, had an incredible game, played 45. And he was hobbled a couple of times too, like going down the lane. He had that 1-and-1 where he kind of slipped on his second step and he looked kind of, I was a little scared for him. I knocked on wood for him there too, because I don't want to see any players get hurt, no matter if they're wearing our jersey or not, you know? So
Yeah.
when I saw him kind of like getting up and limping and I saw the replay of how he slipped, I was just like, ooh, like I've seen, kind of ACLs kind of go that way. So luckily for him, he was able to get up, make his free throw, kind of, walk it off and be able to play the rest of the game. That's always a good thing to see. But yeah, no, these guys put a ton of minutes. And it's not like either team has a cakewalk the next game either. Like let's talk about the Jays, obviously, since this is a Creighton centric podcast. You
Yeah.
got
Enough
you got
Providence. Let's get off
yeah,
the.
no, yeah. Hey, shout out to you, Providence. You did what you had to do. You won that game. You snapped our 7 game winning streak. But the Jays play against St. John's next game in New York at Karnasaka. Like that is not an easy place to play at all, no matter how good or bad St. John's is this year. And they've been very competitive. Like let's be honest, when the Jays beat them at home a couple weeks ago, I thought that was a little bit more lopsided than it should have been. I know St. John's going to have a chip on their shoulder. Coach Anderson is always the type of guy who is going to motivate his players to play the best that they can. Talk to me about like what you see happening at St. John's. Of course, this is Ryan Nemhart going back to the place that he probably does not like at all with what happened last year at this time. So talk to me about like what the Jays have to look forward to with a tough St. John's team at home.
Yeah, I think a couple things to highlight. One, I was quite happy to see St. John's DePaul go to double overtime.
Mhm.
I was trying to figure out what time the Johnnies got home from Chicago, but I imagine it was quite late, not only with the time
Yeah.
change, and then you get to play almost extra half of basketball. The other
And
thing
then
to
also landing in New York and having to go through that to
yeah,
get home too, like that's
yeah,
no joke in and of itself.
yeah, I don't know what airport they fly in and out of. If it's not JFK, they got a long distance of travel.
Mhm.
Um, I think at home, not having Posh Alexander, when we play them at home, not having Posh, he's kind of the driving force behind a lot of what they do. He doesn't score a lot, but he's just sets up their press and is just a nuisance to
Mhm.
opposing point guards. AJ Storr, really good freshman that they're starting to kind of give the green light to. I think I'd heard he's averaging like 16 over his last 5 games. And then, you never know with Andre Curbelo, like dude was all Big Ten, transfers to St. John's from Illinois. He's been playing, but I don't know if it's behavior outside of the basketball program that's keeping him from sort of coach's choice sitting out. But so Johnny's at full strength. There's a reason they won like 13 of their first 14 games.
Right.
They play fast, they press you, they can cause a lot of frustration. We've seen at times the Jays struggle with press this year. So you got to be ready to go, get punched in the mouth. And I a similar game to what was Seton Hall, I think, in a lot of aspects. Just you're playing in a more compact arena, and you're going to get a full 90 feet of St. John's versus Seton Hall in a half court. They're trying to muck it up and make us be a physical team and protect the basketball. And I think all those things are really good for this team. And as you get into March, that's the kind of shit you got to deal with. Like refs are going to swallow the whistle. So be patient, take the extra dribble, take the extra time to see who's open, see who's not. And we'll see. I do know there's a decent contingent of Blue Jay alumni in New York City who are taking a party bus to the game. So
Oh, you would have the insider on that for sure.
I would. I had to turn it down, sadly, but
Yeah.
yeah, I think there was plenty of tickets available, which is a good sign for our guys. But hard turnaround. You fly from Providence back to Omaha on Tuesday night, and then you got to go back to New York City on Friday. So hopefully everything they're doing from a nutrition and Jeremy from a recovery standpoint is really spot on. It's funny, I talked to Jackson McAndrew, who's one of the recruits, and he was just so impressed with everything from a strength and nutrition side that makes me happy. That was one thing I thought we could have improved. I, as a manager, could eat however I wanted, but I think our team definitely needed additional nutrition advice from the experts. Not calling you out, Jay, just saying in general, we needed more education.
What I will say, obviously, like, and I think about this all the time too. Obviously, I feel like I'm at this point in my career where I'm the old man yelling at clouds, like, oh, I wish I had this in my era type of thing, right?
Yeah.
NIL, totally wish I had. Like the rules are a lot more lax now than they used to be. Even back in the day, like I remember when we used to have our preseason like do's and don'ts type of meeting, like don't accept a meal from strangers. You never know if that's gonna come back and bite you in the butt for eligibility or whatever the case may be. Like all those rules have changed so much that like obviously we're in an era now where the players are about as well a treat and they deserve it, right? Like
yeah.
There was like honestly, if we kind of look back at the archaic nature at which the NCAA was ran, like we should not have been kind of treated the way that we were. But at the same time, like you love to see that this current generation is, are able to make money off their likeness. They're able to actually have decent meals pretty much every day. They're able to, have access to more nutrition than we did, as opposed to just like the food hall and whatever the case may be that we had to go through. So I'm very much happy about that. So I just wanted to touch on that real quick. The other thing I wanted to say too, because you mentioned about like how you mentioned Seton Hall and St. John's kind of being in the same breath as far as like toughness. And, that's kind of a test that the Jays have to kind of go through in order to prepare themselves for what the NCAA tournament is going to be like. Dude, I find that like the original Big East teams, like that's just in their DNA. Like that generations, they always change, but like a St. John's team is forever gonna be tough. A Seton Hall team is forever gonna be tough. Villanova, like, don't even, you know what I mean? Like, that's in their DNA. So obviously, like us having to move from, you see the Valley flag behind me, I'm always trying to represent, but like us having to move from the Valley to the Big East, I think that that's something that like it's taking us a little bit of time to adjust to. Obviously, Coach Mack has adjusted his playing style in order to be successful in the Big East because he has been in his tenure since we moved from the Valley to the Big East. But I just feel like we still don't have like, I guess, grit. Is that like the right word that I'm looking for? Or mental toughness, physical toughness? What is it that like is preventing a team from Omaha, Nebraska from being considered as one of those big, tough, gritty schools like a lot of those schools in the East Coast are.
Yeah, I don't think you could point to one thing. Having lived in New York City now, I can see like the kids St. John's is recruiting, grew up playing like outdoor sport court with grown men. And I think you just get thrown into it as like a 10-year-old who wants to play basketball. It's like, this is what you have, right? Like
Right.
gym access is hard to come by. So you're playing at Riverside Park with a bunch of 30, 40-year-old men. It's like either be tough or get out.
I'll get off the court. Yeah.
Yeah. And maybe that's extreme, but I generally think it's who are you recruiting?
Mhm.
The other thing I'll add is there has to be a balance of we recruit shooters, right? Like,
Of
and
course. Yeah.
in a lot of instances, like if you grow up being a shooter, you're not necessarily going to grow up playing basketball in that style. Like, like the bully ball aspect is much different than sort of this finesse shooting. And I think to your point, we are trending more into the middle of that. Like we still have the shooting, but the bully ball, we have that capability too. Like Trey one-on-one in isolation, I love watching it. It's just absolute poetry, whether he gets to the rim and gets fouled or he gets to that like 12-foot stop, fade away. So
Dude,
it's
I've
finding
always
that
said
middle
that about
ground.
Trey. I've always said that about Trey. Like even last year as a freshman who was thrown into the fire, like the so here's the one thing I'll say about Trey Alexander, right? Like when I was watching him early on last year when he was a freshman, it was a Nebraska game on the road that the Jays were able to win. But I remember like he got a defensive rebound and Ryan Nehart was calling for the outlet and he started dribbling off the court. And in my mind, I was just like, just give up the ball, run to a corner and be ready to spot up and shoot. And then as the year went on, I was just like, Trey, get the rebound and go. You know what I mean? And like his game has developed in such a way and honestly, like sometimes it's just kind of the situation that you're placed in, right? Like
Yeah.
he was recruited thinking that he could do one thing. He showed that he could do much more. Obviously, the coaching staff gave him the green light and the keys to be able to do much more. Like that is certainly like an aspect of it. But I just kind of love seeing like the progression of this kid because like again, double overtime loss the other night, but like in the key moments when we needed a bucket, it was either Ryan M. Harden in the pick and roll up top or it was Trey going 101 downhill on this guy. He had one sweet move where he pump faked this guy out of his shoes, kissed it off the glass, it hit off
That
the
was
rim like two,
pretty.
three times, and it fell in. Like, I'm just like, man, like as a 19-year-old, did I have that in my game? Hell no. You know
Uh,
what I mean? So I love his game and I love what he brings to the Jays for sure. But I do understand what you're talking about like trying to find that right balance of we need shooting because like in a coach max system that's going to be a premium like if you
yeah.
could shoot the ball he's going to find a place for you to play but at the same time, when you kind of look at like where the Jays have been defensively in these last couple of years, obviously with Kalkbrenner's ascension, it's kind of like, hey, we're not necessarily let it fly from three anymore like we used to. We could definitely do it in spurts. That's not what our calling card is anymore. But like as far as like grounding opponents and like being able to stay in games that maybe offensively like suggest that we shouldn't be in, but because our defense is so on point that we're able to lock some guys down. The other night, notwithstanding, obviously, like Providence scored 94, 96, whatever it was. But at the same time, it's just like you got to kind of find that right balance with the kids that you recruit.
Yeah, totally. I think it's somewhere in the middle or just having the right mix. I mean, it's I like this team from that standpoint. You have
Mhm.
guys who uh kind of have all cards in the deck. And we're even starting to see a little bit of it with Mason. Like the toughness is coming. I thought Mason at Seton Hall, his dad was in attendance sitting right behind me. You could see he was proud, but he's still trying to coach him and say on that tip that you should have just dunked it. Like be the man.
Yeah,
And
right.
but you can see the loose balls, you can see the offensive rebounds, you can see the hustle plays. And I keep talking and harping on this, but that this is the shit that wins in March. It doesn't show
Right.
up in box scores, but like you got to win the 50-50s and you got to eliminate, just honestly being soft. Like, and this team is like progressing in that direction. And I love to watch it, especially live.
one of the best things like for me to watch obviously is not only like I mentioned Trey Alexander, like the progression of the players, but it's just kind of like how where we were, and this is actually a good segue because I want to talk about this with you. Last time that you were on this podcast was after the Texas game, if I'm not mistaken. Uh, and we talked about like the games where like, or the Jays, sorry, were at the beginning of that 6 game losing streak. We just won 7 in a row, lost to Providence, which would have made it 8 in a row. Now we kind of have to climb ourselves back up, let's so to speak. Like we have to win a very tough game against St. John's on the road. Uh, we are back in the top 25, which is where honestly, if you asked me 2 or 3 weeks ago if we're ever going to be back there, I would have said like, hey, I don't know, like we kind of dug ourselves too much of a hole for them to give us consideration, but they did. We were at 18 this past week. So I would just want to hear, obviously, like from you, for the last time we talked was after that Texas game. What have you seen from the Jays as far as their progression to bring them to a 7 game winning streak, being back into the top 25 consideration, and then some of the mock drafts, or not mock drafts, sorry, mock and so the tournament things that I've seen have them as high up as 5.
Yeah.
So what have you seen from the Jays that have helped them with all this improvement? And then also like give me your idea of where do you think the Jays will rack up as far as seating wise, if the season kind of turns out the way that we expect it to.
Way to the impossible task. I like the
It's a loaded question, but I only give you the tough question because I know you can handle it.
yeah. I mean, I think losing streak, number of things. Since then, it really hasn't been like offensively. This team has just really been solid defensively. Like we don't foul, so the free throw rate and sending other teams to the free throw line, I think we're second in the country, which is bananas. So anytime I see the opposing team in double bonus, I'm like, who's reffing and what are they watching?
Immediately, conspiracy theory might comes out.
Yeah, I mean, the first half of Seton Hall, we had 11 fouls, and I was like, what? We got the kids behind us yelling, this is Big East basketball. And I was like, yeah, you're right. What are the refs doing?
That's hilarious.
So I think that piece, I think on the glass, we've been solid, not giving up second chance opportunities. And then even sending guys to the glass. The Providence
I will
game,
say that
not
that
as much.
UConn game, yeah, that UConn game too, like the one that we just had at home, that was a tough one, obviously. And I was talking to shout out to Josh, our producer, who's behind the scenes. We were kind of talking about it as the game was happening, but I kind of said like, hey, it's kind of tough to box out every time because UConn did not shoot a high percentage from the field, so there's a lot of rebounds there to be had, and obviously like it's kind of a thing like when we're playing, if you start missing a whole bunch of shots and your teammates are missing a whole bunch of shots, it makes you crash a glass even harder because
Yeah.
you're expecting all of these misses. So I think that kind of fed into the UConn team having such a big lead on the offensive glass. I think the Jays gave up like 18 offensive rebounds that game, which is an anomaly for the year. But
Yeah, I hear I'm trying to make this point about us being good, but you're right. I guess what I'll piggyback on that, Jay, though, is not shooting a high percentage because what we're giving them is exactly into our game plan. Like I think was Andre Jackson, the 44, who's a really good
yeah,
basketball player. You got to give up something. Okay, let's give him unlimited space and let him loft up 20 footers and airball them. Like they're playing exactly into what we want them to do. I think that's another thing. Coach Mack has covered it in a lot of post-game press conferences, which is defensively, we did everything we wanted to. They just made tough shots.
right.
And I think over the course of the season, you see that always revert to the mean. And over these last, 8 or 9 games, Providence made some tough shots. That Lock kid is really good. We don't need to talk about that anymore. But I
He
think,
he was incredible. Like, I mean, you brought him up, so I gotta mention, like, every time I doubted what he was gonna do, like he just shut me up because he
yeah,
was coming off curls and down screens, shooting it with confidence a couple of times, like with a little step back shot. I was just like, no way, bang, no way, bang. And like you said, Trey Alexander was all up on him, Nemar
right
was all
there.
up on him, but he's making those shots. So what can you do except for, tip your cap, give him one of these and run the ball back up on the offensive end.
Yeah. But yeah, I think just defensively, like really locked in, believing in the coach's game plan. And then I guess if we're going to talk offense, I would say we've had one guy that's found a way to step up in each game. Baylor at Seton Hall. Trey was freaking awesome versus UConn. A little more balanced at Providence, but I just over the course of this winning streak, like when guys need to make plays, they're doing it. So um yeah, just you gotta kind of erase the Providence game and get back out to New York and say, hey, let's keep climbing the ladder. Like we're still, everything is in front of us, and everything we want to accomplish and do as a team is still in front of us. So we'll see.
So you mentioned something just now that before I let you go, I definitely want to kind of pick at a little bit. You mentioned that it's a different guy every game, which is in the grand scheme of the season, like that's a great thing to have, obviously, because it helps you that the other teams can't really game plan on one specific individual, especially down the stretch. You never know who it's gonna be that's gonna be uh given the keys to help the Jays win, obviously. Um, but I mean, when I think back about like my era, obviously like Doug was the man. If we were ever in a stretch, like the ball was going to him one way or another. And every twice in a while, Mac would like have Doug as a decoy, and it'll be Ethan who would be getting an open shot like on the backside somehow, some way. You know what I mean? So so I understand that there's like a good and a bad to both situations, but in these games that are coming up, obviously with the Jays trying to fight for a Big East, they still have a chance to be Big East regular season champions, and then obviously like Big East tournament champions is definitely in the cards as well. Even though like a couple of weeks ago they might not have been. And then leading into the NCAA tournament, do you feel like it's going to be a detriment to the Jays that they don't necessarily have a quote unquote go to guy down the stretch, or do you feel like Coach Mack will still be able to like draw up whatever he needs to for the individual who's having a good game that day?
Yeah, I don't see it as an issue because we have, I mean, Baylor can go off the bounce, but I would much rather, whether it's R2 or Trey, one of those two guys with the ball in hand and just get to Horn's action with Kalkbrenner coming out and setting a screen. I think we'll be fine. Geez, I just realized Baylor was 2 of 12 versus Providence from 3.
Yeah, and it didn't
Um,
seem that way too because like so here's the thing about Baylor that I absolutely love, but at the same time it's very like sometimes it masks his performance. He does so many of the little things, like the
yes.
communication, the rebounding, being in the right place in the right time. Like he does all those little things. So even if you don't realize that he goes 2 of 12 sometimes, and like one of the things that I've kind of had a little bit of critique about Baylor about is just be a little bit closer to the 3 point line. Not every shot has to be a logo three. You know what I mean? And I think that like, I mean, am I crazy to think that that would help his percentage like move up a couple notches? Definitely not. I don't think so. Like that's just conventional basketball. But
Yeah.
I just feel like I mean like Mac has had the luxury of having guys like Ethan, guys like Mitch,
Midge.
and now guys like Baylor. Like Mac really loves like those deep threes because it creates so much gravity for all the other guys to be able to drive in a pin. Like I understand what the thought process is behind it, but like sometimes I'm just like, so again, he launches a deep one, he misses. Colbert gets the offensive rebound, he relocates to the corner where his toes are on the line, and he makes it. That's such an easier shot than the first one that he took. You didn't
Yeah.
need to shoot that 37 footer. You know what I mean?
I can't even, I mean, that's like, NBA versus college line. I can't even get an NBA three off. I have to heave it. So for those out
Hey,
there
you.
who are questioning this statement, go try and shoot an NBA three-pointer and you'll realize
Oh, bro, I'm with you. Like you were my rebounder for the TBT three-point shootout like a couple of
it's
summers
hard. It's
ago. It's very difficult because like you just trying to get into range, like and especially like I mean the TBT three-point shootout is a totally different thing. But I'm just saying like in the heat of a game, like the ball is moving, everything's moving so quickly. I don't know. I just feel like, in my opinion, this is my opinion. Now, if I'm wrong, you guys can call me out and say, Jay, you're wrong. That's fine. I'll take it on the chin. But like, I just feel like if Baylor is just a couple feet closer to the 3 point line, it might distort our spacing that Coach Mack is looking for to get those downhill driving lanes. But it is my opinion that Trey and Ryan are good enough guys to be able to take their guys off the dribble or off ball screens, whether or not they have that extra feet and a half, 2 feet of space. That is just my humble opinion. But
yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I would love to see his percentages go up because he is such a great shooter, and I think sometimes he kind of does himself a disservice by spreading the court out a little too much.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we're getting nitpicky when you win 8 in a row. Like a lot of things are
Yeah,
going right. So
yeah,
this
we're
week,
we're splitting hairs, though for
yeah,
sure. I understand that part for sure. But again, like again, this is the most biased Creighton podcast you'll ever hear out there. So when I
uh,
offer my opinion about, what I think guys should do or could do to help the team be better, like that's really all I want to see. A 2 of 12, like we know Baylor's a better shooter than that, and he's shown it.
yeah.
But again, I just feel like sometimes you could fall too in love with like that deep logo three, and doesn't necessarily have to happen that way all the time.
To answer, I'll give you a seed range. I'm going to put us.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Sorry, I still need to hear that answer
Uh,
from you. Let's get it.
well, let's go 4 to 6. I'm not going to give you an exact seed. If I did, it'd be a
Mhm.
5. So I think if things play out as they can, um, 4 is probably our highest, and then 6, 7 being the worst for the Blue Jays. So it's a seed, and it's March isn't really about seeding; it's about matchups. So
Match. Yep.
we'll maybe you'll have me on again. We can talk Big East recap and prepare for
Bro,
some madness.
stop. You literally have the keys to this podcast. Anytime you want to step into the gym with me, bro, anytime I got you. Trust me. We're definitely gonna have you back on again, especially when it's closer to that tournament time. Um, Again, so happy to talk a little bit of Korean basketball with you. Jays are at St. John's on Saturday. We're gonna have to be locked in and see if they're able to win that tough one on the road. Again, a game in New York, never going to be easy. When I played St. John's in my 1 year in the Big East, it was at Madison Square Garden. That was my first time in that building. Dude, my eyes were just like on 10. Like I remember just looking around and seeing like all the Knicks retired jerseys up there, and like I couldn't believe that I had made it. You know what I mean? So
Yeah,
like
special
all of
place.
these, yeah, such a special place. Like obviously the Jays aren't playing at Madison Square, but I'm just saying like to be playing Big East basketball in New York in general, like that's just such a special moment. I hope the Jays are able to live up to that moment and bounce back to their first loss in quite some time, which we were all um, not happy to see. But I mean, obviously, when you go on a 7 game winning streak, it's kind of tough to get that eighth one. So, shout out to the Jays. Lost a very close game to Providence on the road. Again, no shame in losing to a top 25 team in conference play on the road in double overtime. Like, let's keep things into perspective. Big time on the Jays bandwagon right now for how well or how far they can go, not only in this Big East season, but in the Big East tournament championship. I would love to see Coach Mack hoist up a tournament championship trophy that we weren't able to get for him back in 2014. Man, that still hurts my heart to this day. And we'll just kind of see how things play out. But Michael, I'm very appreciative of you taking a little bit of time out today and stepping back into the J with me. Any last word for the Jays fans out there who are just kind of, looking for some positive things going into Saturday's game?
Yeah, I don't want to correct you, but we'd won 8 in a row, not 7 in a row. So
Well, okay, I saw a graphic that the last Jays team to win, like, I think it was 11 in a row, was our 2012 team. So I was just like, hey, hey, hey. When I saw that going the
uh
other day, like I'm not gonna lie, like I had flashbacks of being on the road at Bradley and at Southern Illinois, coming back to Omaha playing to, going at Drake at Northern Iowa, coming back to Omaha playing to. Like I miss those days. The Valley was crazy. Hey, y'all act like the Valley wasn't much. I promise you, the Valley was as tough as any conference. And here's one way that I'll describe how tough the Valley was. My senior year when we moved to the Big East, we went 16-0 at home. We didn't do that in the Valley. Like we didn't go a full slate of games and
no,
won all of them at home. There was always an Evansville, an Illinois State, a Drake, like a
Colt Ryan.
UNI. Man, there was a team that would just come into Omaha and just give us work for that one night because that was their championship game, that was their Super Bowl.
Yeah.
So it's a tough thing to do, but like the only time we ever went undefeated in my tenure in a Jays uniform was the one and only Big East season that I got to play, which take it for a grain of salt or whatever. I just think that is kind of a fascinating stat, though. So,
It is.
Vandy, any word for the Jays fans out there?
No, I think everyone's equally as excited where we are right now. I think there was some fear amongst fans there for a little bit, but we got the right guys. We can just keep some bench production. If Mason can keep doing what he's doing and Fred can fill 5, 8, 10 minutes a night, like obviously get Farabello back from his sickness. I like the progression. I think the way this team is continuing to grow together, I'm optimistic. Let's get done with February. I hate this month, so let's get into March.
This is definitely the toughest month of the year, obviously, because like teams are getting better and better. I think the Jays also fall into that category of teams who have kind of lost themselves and found themselves again. February is a tough month. It's kind of a make or break month, for everybody in the landscape of college basketball. So I certainly agree with you on that. On the Farabello news, I kind of have to do a little bit of a deeper dive into that too, because I don't quite know what's going on or where he's at as far as like being able to play again. He's certainly a body at the very least that the Jays are missing right now. I mentioned earlier in the podcast the minutes that the Jays played this past game. So we certainly have to find guys who are going to be not only productive, but just at the very least spell those minutes to give a breather to the guys who are starting. So I certainly agree with you on that point. And let's see what the Jays have for us on a Saturday night in New York. I'm certainly looking forward to it. I know you're going to be paying attention. We're definitely going to have you back on the podcast. Michael, thank you so much. This has been my guest manager, Mike, aka Michael Vandevoort. I am your host, Jahenns Manigat. Make sure to like and subscribe to the Field of 68 Media Network. Shout out to my guy Josh Bodie in the background. Always appreciative of everything that you do. And as always, go Jays.
Go Jays.